Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Toothaker, and I am the career coach and strategist behind Ride the Tide Collective, the podcast, and the company. This is a career-focused podcast that helps ambitious professionals strategize and take action to control their career in a way that aligns with their personality and their values. This season, I am embracing the collective part of my company name, and I have invited on various coaches and experts to talk about topics that impact career development and career decisions. And I am so excited about the topic today because we are going to be talking about burnout in high pressure careers. And my guest today is Dr. Tamara Beckford, and she is an emergency physician. So you know she's going to have some stories about being a doctor and being in the ER. And she is also the CEO of Your Caring Docs, which is a company that helps companies create amazing cultures and reduce employee burnout through self-care workshops. She hosts the Dr. Tamara Beckford Show, where she has interviewed over 165 physicians about self-care, wellness, and the fantastic things that they are doing inside and outside clinical medicine. Globally, her podcast ranks in the top 5% of podcasts. Congratulations. That is such a big deal. And she has been a guest on dozens of other podcasts and has presented on a multitude of platforms. Let me tell you, she has done a lot of speaking. She has been involved in a lot of different things. She's been a mentor. I also want to recognize that she was recognized as a COVID-19 hero for her work during the pandemic. So I know a lot of us, all of us that have lived through that, we thank you for your work in doing that and trying to keep everybody safe as best you can. And last thing I want to say before I throw it over to you is you have 2 books out that have recently come out, and we'll talk a little bit more about those toward the end, but oh my gosh, the topics and the content look so amazing. So I'm very excited to be able to share that with my audience. But Dr. Beckford, thank you so much for being here and being a guest on the podcast today to talk about burnout.
Oh my goodness. When you're reading all of that intro, I'm like, I need to figure out who that person is.
Doesn't that happen though when you're a high achiever and you're doing so many things, you forget until somebody
Yes.
lists all your accomplishments
And
out
you're
what
like,
you've done.
that I need to find that person. But wow, thank you so much for having me on this wonderful show and your podcast. I think we're going to have an exciting and a great conversation today. And I hope and I know actually that it's going to provide a lot of value for your listeners. So, we're going to dig right in.
Yes, yes. So I want to jump off with a
Mhm.
question because
Absolutely.
I feel like people who are in high pressure situations, and I think that you could probably lump high achievers into this because I think that high achievers and high performers create their own high pressure situation
Yes,
in their
they
careers.
do.
I know that was my experience. A lot of my clients have experienced that as well.
Mhm.
And so I want to start off with kind of a broad question of what keeps people from engaging in self-care? Like, what do you
Mm.
feel like is the barrier that you see, especially dealing with doctors who are in high pressure all the time?
Yes, great question. One of the challenges with self-care is I think the rhetoric around it over the past years, is that self-care is just something that you do recreationally.
Mm,
It's not something that's an integral part of your health. You know, why would someone want to just go and just get manicures and pedicures and then that's not part of the health. That's an aesthetics thing. That's not
mm,
something that's going to cause or to help to develop that's not in a part of personal development. That's not a part of getting you beyond or moving you further into your high pressured career. And so the thought process around self-care has never been one that is it's important for the health and well-being of the individual, and
mm.
therefore it's on the back burner. It's not even on the back burner. It's behind the stove Like when that thing falls and you have to move the stove out and then all those things, you're like, ooh, that's where self-care has been put this
Yeah.
entire time. So now we're realizing how important it is because we're in the realm of burnout. And
Mm,
we're at burnout. Why? Because we've been consistently just working, 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 working.
mhm.
Breaks, they were thought about, encouraged, depending on the environment that you worked in.
Right.
Breaks were considered a sign of weakness, right?
Mhm, mhm.
If you hear the rhetoric, oh, back in my days,
I,
I
I
was
think I
able
think
to.
we've all heard that one, and we're kind of sick of it at this point.
Absolutely, because now we're really putting in high value on the fact that back in my days you were not getting any time to rest. Sleep was not considered an important and an integral part of your self-care or even your care. It was saying, oh, I was able to do this with only 3 hours of sleep, and we applaud that. Oh, great job. Um, no, we know that it's to be high functioning, and high functioning is not to say you're only a high achiever on minimal rest or minimal. To be high functioning as a human being, our brain and our body needs to be at a state of rest and restoration throughout the period. So
Yes.
we have really put an emphasis on not doing that, on hustling, continuing, and then, secondary to all of that, you start to break down. You're having either a mental or physical breakdown. You can't move as much. And we've all been through that. When you
Mhm.
get up and you're wondering, like, okay, I used to be able to do all of this. Now I
Right.
can't. But it's a process because you have not given your body the chance to restore itself through these integral periods. So it's not something that you need to just go all the way till you're broken, then fix and then start back again. You try to do the maintenance thing, just like you do for your car. You break in individual periods of time and allow restoration to occur so that you can go longer.
Right, right. Okay, we have to go back to the sleep
Yes.
because in my burnout phase, which I have
Mhm.
now identified as a burnout phase,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
slept about 5 to 5.5 hours a
Mm-hmm.
night. And I wore that like a badge of honor.
Of
And
course.
I was like,
I was
I
able
only
to get
need,
this done. Say
yeah,
that again.
5 hours.
Those
5 hours. I'm good. I'm high functioning. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. All of that. Until I heard a statistic somewhere that was like, if you're not getting X amount of sleep, I think it was the equivalent of basically being
are driving drunk.
driving drunk. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my
Ooh.
gosh, for years.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was like that. And I'm now in a space where I get like a decent amount of sleep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is life
You're like,
changing.
is this what those other people were doing? It's like a
Yes.
whole new world.
Well, so here's my question though, because I can, when I look back now, and if this is not something you cover, just let me know. But when I
Hey.
look back now and I look at that sleep, part of the reason that I didn't sleep is because I was very anxious.
Yes.
And that anxiety like
Mm-hmm.
prohibited my sleep
Mm-hmm.
because my brain was just constantly going and going
Going.
and going and going. I
Mm-hmm.
can guarantee there are people listening to this who are probably like, oh my gosh, that is me right now.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts of like what is the precursor to that? Like, how do we like get our brains to shut off so that we can get the sleep?
That's a great question because I myself went through the same process. As an ER doc, especially when I first came out of training, you can imagine. Now you are you're on your own. All the decisions you make are yours. So you don't have the attending to say, well, I spoke to my attending. No, you made that decision. That person went home. So when I would go home at night, I would constantly question myself. Oh my gosh, is that person okay? I'm not sure. I hope they're okay. Are they going to come back to the emergency room? And God forbid you went back to work the next day and saw a name that was similar to that name. You thought, oh, they came back, but they're worse. And, so your mind is going. And so anxiety levels are very, very high. So what is the one way that I started to learn how to manage that within myself is I had to really learn how to calm the noise. So one is I had to tell myself, okay, you're doing the best that you can with the information that you have right now, right? Because a lot of the anxiety are based on decisions that you had to make. If you think about decisions you made during the day or decisions about things that are not even there yet. Oh my God, 5 months from now, I might need to go on vacation. Sitting there worrying about the decisions for 5 months from now. When we talk about mindfulness, that's what mindfulness is. Appreciating the now, appreciating the present, appreciating what's going on around you. So what are some great ways and tools for someone who is going through that mind that's just consistently just going and refuses to turn off? So one thing you can do is to journal. So start writing down. At the end of that night, if your brain is just going, you can do a brain dump. Write down everything that's going on. And it, guess what? It doesn't have to make sense. So don't get into that perfectionist. There versus they are. No, just do the brain dump. Let it all out, because once you start to take it from the mind onto paper, the mind begins to calm down, right? And then you can also start writing down gratitude. A gratitude practice is a great way when you start to look through your day, because it's hard to be anxious, angry, and grateful at the same time. It's just two different sides of a coin, and it's hard to do the same thing at the same time, to have two of those emotions going. So when you focus yourself on one of those emotions, so I'm going to focus myself on gratitude practice. Oh, what went well today? You did a brain dump and you start talking. I'm so grateful that I got to meet this person. I'm so grateful that I was able to help this person. I'm so grateful. And then you just start writing down all the things that you're grateful for. Your mind begins to calm down. The anxiety starts to ease away. And then, of course, if you are a person who's into meditation, or if you're into yoga, then you can use those breathing techniques, which are part of the yoga techniques, and meditation to quiet your mind. But do keep in mind also, as a caveat, you're not going to go from chatter to super zen immediately, because if you're just starting. It might take a little bit of time, but each time you just center your mind and you bring it back to whatever it is that you're focusing on. And that's why sometimes in yoga or meditation, they might give you a word to hum, because we're thinking about that word and we're doing humming that word, and then our mind goes, and remember that time, Amy, when you forgot to, you just bring it back.
Yes. Okay.
So those are some active ways to do it. Go ahead.
I love that. And I want to touch on the journaling, because I feel like this is a common thing that people will suggest. Oh, just journal. And I will tell you from personal experience, it was very hard for me to focus in on journaling for a couple of reasons. And I had to understand the mindset. And so I want to share this because I think that it's important, especially for high achievers and high performers who are like, it has to be perfect. It has to be this. It has to look this way. I was like that. It's like, if it doesn't look this way, then I don't want to do it. And I'm now in a place where, the way that you describe journaling, just make it a brain dump. There does not have to be a prompt. There does not have to be a structure to it. It just needs to be whatever is on your mind goes onto the paper. And that could be a word. It could be a phrase. It could be a name. It doesn't, you don't have to go into everything about that. And I think that I had this idea of journaling is this like long, exhaustive process of writing pages and pages and pages. And I have to do it every day. And if I don't do it every day, then it's not going to work. And and so I really appreciate what you're saying and how you're describing it, because I feel like had somebody, I said this to another guest, like, had somebody explained it to me this way, I would have done it a different way, and I hear,
Absolutely.
like, I'll be honest, I hear people that we would call like gurus. I'm like quoting that for people who are
Mm-hmm.
listening to this, not watching it, that, oh, just do this. Just do the gratitude, just do the journal, just do the thing. But they're not really getting into, what do you actually write down? What
Yes,
does it mean? And then how do you make it work for
for
you?
you.
And I feel like the thing that I've learned most on like the journey that I've been on is make it work for you. So
Absolutely.
yeah, even if somebody says this is a way to do it, doesn't mean you have
Uh,
to do it that way. Do
you
it in
just
a way
need
that
to
works.
formulate it to work for you. And you know what? That's the essence of self-care. Because your self-care, if we really think about it, self-care is about self. So you're making it work for you. So you have these techniques, formulate the technique so that it works for you. So if we're telling you like, hey, try to journal, and remember, we're giving you this as a tool to reduce your stress. If your stress goes higher, because we said it is not the tool for you. The tool to help, whatever tool will help to reduce the stress
Mhm.
or change the way that you do it. The way that I use that tool might not be the same way that you use it. So some people, as you mentioned, they are very stringent in the way that they journal, and they've been doing this since they were 6 years old, and they have volumes of journals when every night it's their diary. Remember, now we're using the word journals, but before, remember, it was
Yes.
diary.
Hmm.
Dear diary, today I'm very upset at such and such.
Hmm.
So now you can just write, you know, great value Zoom, made for more, dump words that don't make sense, but they're in my head and just keeps riling over and over and over. And I need to get it out so my mind can get quiet and I can go to sleep. Does make sense to
Yes.
anyone?
Yes.
Like your brain, you dumped everything out.
Yes. I think also, and I feel like people don't talk about this enough. So I can write, but when I am unloading,
Mm-hmm.
I am actually more verbal. And
Mm-hmm.
so it helps me to have, somebody or something to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another friend who's like that as well. And we have really tried to share this idea of it does not have to be written. Or
Mm-hmm.
like you could bring up like a note in your phone and do a
Just
voice to text
absolutely.
versus writing things out. And I was talking to my friend about that, and she said, I've started putting that into practice. And it's
Mm.
been so much easier because she's such a verbal processor.
Ah, I
And
love
she's saying
it.
because she does not like to write, like it's just not her strength. But
Mm-hmm.
man, when she starts to speak, it all just comes out of her. And so I think even from a tactical standpoint, think
Absolutely.
about how you function and how you need to share. Like if you're a verbal dump, like I dump on my husband all the time,
Mm, I do too.
he's my person and he gets it. He's cool. He can handle it. But there was a season where he was like, I need you to stop. Like it's too much.
I
And
love it.
but had I understood, oh, voice to text, that
Mm-hmm.
would have been such a great way for me to be able to unload
To
some of that.
unload.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that,
Now, a great technique to quiet the mind.
yes, yes. Okay, one thing that I want to talk about, because we mentioned this before when we were kind of strategizing for this interview, you
Mhm.
had talked about leaders and managers of people and how do they manage their team and all of that. I feel
Absolutely.
like that is not something that, at least in my podcast this season, that
Mhm.
anybody has really touched on. So we're touching more on kind of you as a person. How do you manage? But I know
Mhm.
I have a lot of clients and listeners who also are leaders and they
Absolutely.
manage other people. And so can we have like a discussion around, if you are a manager, what do you need to be looking for in the
Mm.
workplace? Like what are some signs that we need to look for to be like, ooh, maybe we need to have a conversation with that person?
Yes, it's a great question. One of the challenge that occurs when you're a leader of a team is that you have many different personalities because you have a lot of people who are working as one in order to move said organization forward. So, as long as everyone has the buy-in and they are on the same page, working together in order to move everyone forward, then we know that that's great. But then challenges occur. People's life change. Pandemics just randomly show up.
Yes.
And there are different ways of handling it. We've all been taught to, like in med school, we were taught that everyone, when you hear about, mental challenges, there are a lot of people who we have this line that's considered the norm. Like, oh, you're normal, above this line, everyone's normal. Below this line, they're having some type of mental challenge, right? But some people are right at the edge and they're able to handle their lives. They're able to handle whatever challenges that occurs. So they don't go up like below that edge and end up being in the abnormal mental states, where they need intervention.
Right.
But sometimes something just really enters into their lives that just throws them off the balance. And then they end up in the zone where they're just going further and further down. So, you as a leader, what are some ways that you can recognize this? Now, burnout is one of the things that once they enter into a zone, especially when it's related to work, because burnout really is related to like your workplace versus just depression overall is related to your life.
Right.
So you start to notice that the quality of the work starts to change. If you
Mm.
have an employee and not just the productivity is down, but the quality begins to change, then you might need to sit them down and find out what's going on in their life. Because if this person is someone that would produce A quality work and now you're getting C quality work,
Mm.
they don't really just go from A to C just because everything's fine and they ought like out of the blue just becomes a person who does not feel like producing or giving their best.
Right.
Something has intervened and knocked them off and the balance is off. So ways to do that is to tap into them. And it's not I know a lot of times people think, okay, well, there must be substance abuse going on. Now, think about it. When someone abuses substance, they're doing it in order to escape whatever reality they're having. So the
Mhm.
reality goes in before the substance abuse enters in, right?
Right.
So if you can intervene prior, then the person is less likely to enter into that zone of substance abuse in
Mhm.
order to escape what's going on. So you can tap in and find out, like, hey, Bob, I'm noticing that the work quality is a little bit different. Like, is there something going on at home? And then you might find out, like, Bob's daughter is fatally ill, and, just something
Right.
personal that you just never thought. But Bob is trying to keep a good face at work, but the quality is changing
Mm.
you know so those are ways to just tap in, and then once you figure that out, the goal would be to find ways in order to support that person, because when you can support them, we can get them back up
Mm.
to speed. So what are some ways that you can support a person? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're supporting them by telling everybody Bob's business. No, you can find
Right.
out from Bob, like, or, well, is there any way that I can help or to support you? And Bob might need, on said days, I know we're coming into the office every day, but my loved one has chemo on such and such days. Maybe I can work from home or, work remotely on those days so that I can be there for chemo.
Yeah.
Just something that enters into, a solution that really can help Bob. And once Bob goes through that phase and then I'm pretty sure that Bob will not only be a proponent for the organization. If anyone else is having challenges, Bob might be able to even look and recognize, like, okay, and pay that forward. I mean, this is might sound like a utopia, but this is just being a human being.
Well, and what's so hard is so when clients get to me, I would say about
Mhm.
half of them have come from really toxic situations and
Environment.
toxic
Mhm.
management specifically. And so I'm kind of in this place of like helping them heal and move on in their next position and all of that. And what you're describing for some people does sound like a utopia
Yes.
because they haven't had that level of care
Mhm.
from a manager. And so I love that you're talking about this and giving even examples of language, because I think there's such a difference between saying, hey, I'm noticing a difference in your quality of work versus going, you know, hey, what's going on? Your work sucks right now. Like, what happened? Like, that vibe is totally different.
Different. Different.
And you as a manager, I feel like a lot of times the managers have different resources too,
Mhm.
or a different level of knowledge. Like I remember getting training as a manager at organizations that I worked at where I knew just more about what was available to
Yes.
my people so that I could give them resources. Hey, did you know you could do this? Hey,
Yes.
here's an option. All of that. It's just empathy. It's just like basic empathy for the people that work for you.
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
I love
So,
that.
recognizing is like one of the top ways. And how do you recognize? By tapping into your people and doing checks every once in a
Yes.
while, like a 2-minute check, in on them. You're walking down the hallway. How are things going,
Mm-hmm.
Sarah? They're good. Okay. And then you can check in with that person and you might know something personal because guess what? You've asked, hey, what are
Right.
some of the things that you enjoy doing outside of work? Because these are important to them. Like even the statistics shows, like, why are people leaving? Other than money, they're leaving. They don't feel like there's any advancement. They
Yep.
feel like they're being disrespected in the workplace. So
Mm-hmm.
these are all ways for you as managers to be able to keep your team together on the same
Yeah.
accord because you're all working for a same goal. And
Mm-hmm.
if your team feel valued,
Yes. Yes. And okay, I have to make a nod for high achievers and high performers as well, because I
Mhm.
feel like we are the ones, and this is personal experience and from what I see from clients, where I will almost double down on my work when I'm stressed, when I'm burnt out, when something's
Yes.
going on at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is almost my escape, is going into work and basically being on overdrive
On
and
over, yes.
overdoing it. And I feel like high performers get overlooked so much for
Absolutely.
mental health and just general care because we put on such a good facade and we're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we're fine. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
I can handle it. I can handle it. The amount of times that I said that when I was absolutely drowning in
Yes.
my mind and in what was going on, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not healthy. But people looked
Yes.
at me and they're like, well, you're the rock. You're the
Yes.
stable one. You're the one that everybody goes to for answers and all of that. But who was I supposed to go to?
You look around and you don't have any. And with that, like and we said, that's the tapping into your team members for those 2-minute check-ins on a,
Mhm.
as best as you can on a consistent basis, because you will see, because even high achievers, there are times that they look flustered and you can tell.
Yes.
But you can only tell if you tap in and see it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because during the time, and the challenge with high achievers is that we go, 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 go. By the time we break down, there is nothing left. So we don't break down at 30%. We don't break down with 15%. We break down with negatives. Like there's fumes left.
Yes.
So when you are leading that team and you can tap in and then you can see, you'll see the time when you're saying, okay, your work, wow, you're really doing a lot, but I've noticed A, B, and C. Because
Hmm.
even with high achievers, the work, because that's just your personality, you're a high achiever. So your work will still be there and you'll still produce, but you'll start to neglect other parts of your life in
Hmm.
order to produce that. And that's right.
I feel like I'm being called out, right? If anybody else listening feels that way, I am right there with you.
Yes, we've all been there. We've all been there. You roll out of bed and then you roll again and then you said, okay. And then you use the words, I might as well get up now. I
Mm-hmm.
might as well. And this is how you know that you're heading to burnout. When you get to work and you're in the car and you're contemplating, do I even want to go in the building? And then some people even cry in the car
Mm.
before they go. And then, like you said, you either put on the facade, you're high achiever, so you put that facade on, yeah, go team.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes that moment of you have to do a lot of self-encouragement to get out of the car to get into, you're headed to
Mm-hmm.
burnout.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Okay. So that leads us into our actions. I think this is a perfect transition into that. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I want to do with these episodes is make sure that the audience has about 2 or 3 actions that they can really hone in and take with them. And I think we've talked about some of them, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to go in and just make sure that we are kind of capturing and recapping everything. And you just said one of them, which is the warning signs.
Absolutely.
So talking about, in the car, man, everything that you're talking about, I'm having these flashbacks.
I've been there myself. I have been there myself.
Man, I don't regret doing this season, but I will tell you, every conversation that I have had up to this point is taking me back to times that I'm like, am I really healed from that? Am I really worked
But
through
it's we've all been there, and yes, it sounds like we're ripping that scab open, but
it?
it really shows. And the reason why we're doing this, and this is what we do as entrepreneurs, and this is what we do as like podcasters, is that we are serving. So we are, yes, we're reliving this life in order to serve you who are listening,
Mm-hmm.
because we want you to understand it. The way that you are right now and how you're feeling right now does not have to be your reality for the rest of your life. There are
Yes.
opportunities to change, and you're not alone.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I feel good now. And I think even as entrepreneurs, we have to be reminded of that too. I still
Mhm.
have some of these tendencies. And
Yes.
I have to really like put a lot of checks and balances in place to make
Hmm.
sure that I don't go back to the
To
way
those.
that I used to be and the way that I used to live. And once you've been there and you've identified it, and you know
Hmm.
what it looks like, it's so much easier than to move forward and go, ooh,
Absolutely.
I know this warning sign.
Yes,
We've been here
absolutely.
before.
Yes, like I've been down this street before. It's just like when you've driven down that street and it's been a while. Like for those of you guys who might have moved away from your childhood neighborhood or house, and then you're driving towards it and you get this sense of familiarity. That's
Yes.
kind of the same thing that occurs when you're heading back to those zones of, wow, these signs are starting to be familiar again. Like,
Yeah.
the insomnia, I'm working, I'm saying yes to everything, because
Those are
boundaries,
really
that's
good
a,
warning signs. Yeah.
yes, boundaries are a huge way to help to reduce that. Those two words, the N and the O,
What is it?
they're just,
No is a sentence or no.
yes,
Is
no
that
is
what
a
it is?
sentence, a full sentence. But it's so hard, right? Because if especially if you're a people pleaser, so saying no is important, boundaries are important, recognizing the signs are important, putting checks and balances in place is
Mhm.
important. And
Mhm.
then most important of all for me is finding time for yourself. That's your self-care. So what is your self-care? We've talked about the brain dump, the journaling in, as a way to do the end of the day care. Um, Self-care is what it is that brings you back to the you that you remember before all the titles, So
Yeah.
before the I'm this high-powered coach, I am mom, I'm wife. What is it that you like to do? I think that I always ask people, back when you were around 7 years of age, 6 or 7, sometimes, there were just some things that you love. You love to read stories, or you like to paint, or I like to do things with my hand. I like to draw. I would love to sing. I loved dancing. Even today, I was talking to someone and I mentioned that, and she went back. She said, I don't even remember what it is that I like to do, because that's what happens with time.
Mm.
You forget it. So that's your self-care. What is it that you like to do? Now, if you're at work, rest assured, yes, if you like to paint, you're not going to just bust out your easel and paint when you're under stress at work. But finding some times to break in between work, it takes as minute 2 minutes, 2 minutes before that meeting. Find some ways to get some good, either meditating or a breathing exercise for
Mhm.
2 minutes. Relax yourself, right? 2 minutes, maybe it's taking a walk, getting the juices flowing. All it
Yeah.
takes is two
Music.
minutes. Exactly. That was my next thing. Music, playing a song
Music.
that you really, really love, that either gets you energized, or you're about to do a presentation and you're just amped up. Or are you so nervous that you need to relax? Just 2 minutes. These are ways that you can incorporate your self care at
Mhm.
work in order for you to really make it through the day. And it's just 2 minutes. Just break a little time for yourself.
Yes,
Mhm,
yes. Oh my gosh, that is so helpful. And I think
mhm.
kind of harkening back to earlier in our conversation where we talked about make it work for you.
You.
Figure out what that looks like. So I know
Mhm,
back in the day, I never wanted to get up and go for a walk. That was
mhm,
not something that I wanted to do. It was not
mm.
helpful for me, but oh man, would I sit and listen to a song,
Yes.
and
Mhm,
and I had certain songs that evoked certain emotions for me.
emotions. Yes,
I would play
absolutely.
those songs.
Yes, have your list. When I was speaking to another podcaster, she said she had her list. She had like a go-to list that
Mhm.
whenever she was in a situation where she felt stressed, so she made little playlists. And I'm like, that is
Mm.
brilliant.
So smart. So
Yeah, so
smart.
she just goes to
Yes.
her playlist. Oh, this is my list to reduce my anxiety. This is my list when I'm just joyful and I just want to just really just dance it out. So that's the technique. If this is something that works for you, make a little playlist of songs that you love that evoke the emotion that you need at the time. Is it for confidence? You know, that list of songs that just you put it on and no one can stop you. If it's Eye of the Tiger, it's Eye of the Tiger. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where I feel like people are doing more self-care than they think that
Yes.
they are.
Yes.
And it's, as a high achiever, I look at my day as a checklist, things to
Mhm.
be checked off. And
Mhm.
when I think about self-care, I'm like, well, that shouldn't be an item on the check. And you hear my language, right? It
It
shouldn't be
shouldn't
this.
be.
It shouldn't be that, because that is
Mhm.
very much how I used to think, was it has to
Mhm.
look like this and it has to be this way. And I think now, and kind of enforcing what you're saying, it has to work for you. So if
Mhm.
you're a checklist person, put a put a checklist, put it on there,
Yeah, put
like
it in
that's
there, like the category, put it in between. So,
yes.
just as a part of the things, there are people like we mentioned who are very high achieving people who you have your time blocks.
Yes.
Add in, add it in into a time block, because as we mentioned, your self-care, it differs from someone else's. So when you add in your self-care time block, and for you it's okay, I'm going to take a few minutes to meditate between
Mhm.
meetings, that's different than someone else's self-care time block that says, I'm going to rush to the nail salon, try to get my nails done really
Mhm.
quickly, rush back before the meeting. For me, whoo, that's stressful.
Yes. Yes. Like
But
understanding your schedule and
yes,
how you function within that
your
schedule.
time, yeah, but make it work
Yes.
for you. That's
Yes.
the biggest lesson here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Dr. Beckford, this has been So helpful. I know that my audience is going to get so much from this conversation, especially people managers. I feel
Mhm.
like understanding your people and being able to have those conversations, whether
Mhm.
your organization supports it or not, is
Yeah,
still good for you as a manager to be putting those practices into place. So I want to
absolutely.
give you a chance to talk about your books and where people can find you.
Absolutely. So I have the honor of being part of two collaborative efforts that are best sellers. Talk about high achieving. So the first is this book. It's called Made for More. So Made for More, both books are by physician entrepreneurs, and this one is entrepreneurs who are living life and practicing medicine on their own terms. So they're a book of stories, and each of us have put together stories of our life. So these are what we are living. And the first book is for entrepreneurs. So how did we end up on our entrepreneurial journeys? There are 47 stories in this book, and you will be able to find yourself in at least one of those stories. Some of them are tear jerkers, and it'll also give you an insight as to what some of and a lot of these stories are from the pandemic and right
Mm,
before the pandemic. So some of them are what your doctors were going through during that time.
mm,
Um, what they were going through in life, in medicine, in their jobs, careers, just a lot of things. So you'll get a good insight as to, what happens in the medical field. So it's different than the rosy things that you saw on TV, especially the 1980s doctors. Life's a little
mm.
bit different now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the second one is Thriving After Burnout. So this one also is a compilation of real stories from physicians, and these are from female physicians, and a lot of tear jerkers in that one also. This one has a little bit more. There might be around maybe 50 to 60 stories in
Wow.
there of physicians, and you'll see the life and what led them to burnout. You'll
Mm,
see what are some of the things that they're doing after burnout. Their stories vary because of course, everyone's life experience differs, but
mhm.
you should be able to find yourself in at least one of these stories there. So those are the
Yes.
two books, and they are available on Amazon. And for me, as I mentioned earlier, I am the CEO of Your Caring Docs, where I help organizations to build an even more amazing culture and reduce stress and burnout through curated self-care workshops. And I also speak on the topic of self-care to help to reduce burnout. So if you're looking for a speaker, you can find me. If you're trying to find me overall, I'm on LinkedIn, very, very, very much active on LinkedIn. Just look at for Tamara Beckford. That's TamaraBeckford. Now, to go to my website to find all things me, you can go on my website, which is yourcaringdocs.com. That's URCARINGDOCS.com. You'll see some of the things that I've done, the podcasts that I have, which is the Dr. Tamara Beckford Show. You'll be able to see on my newsletter. I put out a newsletter on self-care every Sunday. So you'll be able to sign up for the Sunday newsletters, see speaking engagements that I've been part of. And also, if you'd like to book me to speak at your event, I would love to, and you can do that through that page. So all things me are on yourcaringdocs.com.
That is amazing. And I will have links for all of this in the blog post for this episode. And the other thing I want to do, even if you are not a doctor, if you're not in
Mhm.
the medical profession, I think that it's still worth checking out these books and checking out your podcast, because if you are
Absolutely.
somebody who identifies as a high achiever and a high
Yes.
performer, I think,
Welcome to the club.
looking to the medical profession, that is
Hmm.
such a high stress, high burnout job that I
Hmm.
absolutely believe that you would find yourself there, even if
Absolutely.
you're not in that profession. And I feel like we don't hear a ton of stories from people. And I think
Yes.
especially as women,
Hmm.
we do not hear enough of people talking about it, because a lot of
Hmm.
high achievers are not in a place where they're willing to break down what broke them down. Right. I
Yes.
think
We
you
still
and
have a
I
lot
are
of
there.
barriers.
Yes.
Yes.
there's so many barriers. You and I are there because this is the work that we do and we're helping people through it. But I feel like
Absolutely.
we are such a small percentage of people that are actually in it and going
Mhm.
through it. And so I just want to give an extra push for that, because if you're like, well, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to relate, it does not
Oh
matter.
no, it doesn't.
Does
You
not
know,
matter.
I'll tell you this too. As a doctor, I just see myself, that's just what I do. That's not
Mhm.
my entire identity. So if I were a carpenter, I'm a carpenter, you know? So if I, it's just so I know that at times from the outside, society might look at physicians and say, well, life is so grand for you. But that's why these stories are out there so that you can
Mhm.
see behind the scenes, the emotions that these stories are from women that these women have. Because if you're a high achieving person, substitute the word doctor for whatever it is, and you'll
Mhm.
find these stories relate to you.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
substitute it. So
Yes. Oh my gosh. Dr. Beckford, thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking the time. This was such a wonderful conversation.
thank you for having me. I had a fantastic time.